Hello, you. I'm Laila Stancioff, your host, and welcome to the Find You podcast, From Sick of It to Simply You. Here, our guests will tell us about their transformational journey and challenges they have faced. You also learn tips and strategies on how to do it yourself. Ready for some inspiration? Let's start. Today, we have a special guest, Hassan from Yemen. Now you might ask, what is a guy doing in this podcast? Well, we all live together in the world. And if we want women's role to change, then men also have to be able to see themselves differently. Hassan is an inspiring example of how a man can change his perspective. Hi, Hassan. Very nice having you here in the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, your story is interesting because it's kind of a COVID story, but with an interesting outcome. So tell us a little bit what COVID brought to you.
Yeah, so COVID has been interesting. It really changed a lot of the dynamics at home and also in the professional world. So for me, I was always focused on my career. So I grew up as a man that wants to provide for the family. I come from Yemen, which is a country in the Middle East, and usually the mindset there, or the tradition or the society, expects that a man should behave in a certain way. And when COVID hit, I was really immersed in my role as a man. So I used to always want to provide more for my family, to go the extra mile, to keep everything bottled up inside. And although I was very stable, and I would say I was perceived very confident and strong in the office space, at home it was a completely different story. So I used to bring everything back to the household, and my wife would see how I would behave or react or respond, and it was a lot of emotions that have been bottled up, and usually the release was not very healthy. And eventually COVID was like a blessing, because it put a stop onto that whole mind frame or emotional being that I was expressing, that wasn't very productive or helpful for the family. So it was like a break within the feedback loop, and it completely diverted the path that I was on, and inspired me to then refocus my attention to look inward and understand what it is that's driving me, or propelling me and triggering me to behave sometimes in the way that I used to, or have the expectations of what I should be thinking would benefit the household, my family, the community that I am in as well. So it really was an eye-opener for me, and a blessing in disguise.
That is so cool. You took 2 weeks of quarantine, and some people go to quarantine and watch series all the time, and you took quarantine to really go deep into yourself and find out so many different things. So here's an invitation to who still stays in quarantine for getting COVID. You can get a lot done mentally, spiritually during that. And you mentioned, so you had all these emotions bottled up, and I suppose now you really want, you accept you can feel these emotions, right? You accept you can be sensitive, you accept you can be loving. And how is it to connect to these new emotions? Because I personally have bottled up my emotions for many, many years, and mine was more like a defense mechanism of nobody will affect me, so I thought I didn't even feel them. And when I realized I am sensitive and I wanted to let the emotions come out, in the beginning I had no idea what to do with them. So how is that for you?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I completely understand. For me, the bottling up was really trying to be a people's pleaser of some sort. So during my quarantine time, I took advantage of being alone, away from my wife and my 2 kids, to understand what it is and to really feel my emotions, because they kept coming up and creeping up. And the reason I was willing to explore the way that I was feeling is because of some of the books that I read about upbringing, and also interviews, documentaries with some of leading professionals talking about the subject. One of which was Dr. Gabor, who talks about how stress can be a huge impact on one's life, and that usually people who tend to suppress the stress levels or anger or emotions really have that bottled up from the way that they were raised when they were children. And that really resonated with me because I then started to go deeper into my own upbringing. And the reason that I used to always be a people's pleaser was because I wanted to feel accepted, because I wanted to be loved. And there's always two dynamics within that formula. It's love and authenticity, and it comes in that priority as well. So if a child feels loved, then they would want to be authentic. But if they realize that their parent or guardian or someone that's taking care of them doesn't allow them to be authentic, then they would give up their authenticity just to have that love. So I felt that I was giving a lot of my authenticity up to have the love. And when I was giving up my authenticity, I wasn't being myself. And all those emotions and way that I was seeing the world or really just feeling kept bottling up. And it was only until I realized that my body was giving me signals that I started to really explore it. And it goes into the way that the most important part was realizing what my body was saying. So it was a health trigger that created that understanding of what are these emotions, these feelings, and what the body is expressing. And it goes back as well into like Dr. Gabor's work and other psychologists and medical professionals who express that stress is always going to be there. But if you have chronic stress and always bottle up your emotions to not show them and not be your authentic self, then they would come out in your body. And for me, it was night sweats, fatigue, sadness. My body was always aching. I used to get sick at least once a month with any type of bacterial or viral infection that would be common, but it was becoming very frequent that I was getting stressed and sick from that stress. So when I started realizing my body was breaking down, I wanted to understand what was that reason. And it was when I became more authentic, then my body started feeling better.
That's very interesting. Maybe you share some of those links later, and then we put also in the description of the podcast so that other people can read those same things.
Yeah, I would love to.
And yeah, it's so important really to listen to our body. Like there's so many things that the body is saying, and sometimes interpret as, oh, it's destiny, it's karma. No, it's just my body tells me things. And if I don't listen to it, I'm just running over myself all the time. And that really doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely.
And apart from improving, I suppose it really, you've had an improved health since then, since rethinking yourself. What are other things you found out about yourself? Like, did you find yourself there?
Yeah. So while I was rediscovering myself, I used to be under the impression that respect for elders and also for the masculine in the household was so important. So regardless of what happens, respect for someone who's older than you is of absolute paramount for survival. And that was also from my upbringing and realization. And when I used to come home, I used to think that I need to exert some sort of masculine energy or fake or unconscious masculine energy that was quite the opposite of what I wanted to achieve. So I would show some anger, some strength, like a gorilla or a monkey pounding its chest to be able to say that I'm here and I'm strong and I can handle everything. But the true emotions or feelings there were that I'm scared that I'm not able to provide. I'm scared that I can't be myself. I'm scared that something might happen at home that would impact the way that our relationship is. And my wife is funny enough, has more masculinity than me, because that also pushed me into understanding the polarity between masculinity and femininity. So I learned that male and female, men and women, if people identify themselves with that, can have these types of behaviors, the masculine and the feminine as well. So it doesn't mean that a man is only masculine or a woman is feminine, but rather that a man can have some feminine behavioral aspects in him as well, which are the caring, the strength, support, that men tend to think that they are of masculine. While the woman can also carry the masculine strengths, which is also the courage, the protecting of the tribe and the family and the community. And it's very eye-opening to understand that, once
Yeah,
I start.
that actually these traits are much more, the fact calling them masculine or feminine is so much a gender defined in society. So the society defined that a woman has to be caring and the man has to be good in mathematics. In my house, exactly the opposite. My husband's also good with maths, but I'm much better. I do finances, he does cooking. And, we even joke he's my gay husband because, it's the opposite of what society would expect. So I see that's exactly where you got to, like, both have both. And this doesn't make one more a man or more a woman, or, we just are. We
Absolutely.
are.
Even last night, like we went out for a walk with my kids, and then when we came home, my wife prepared them for bed, so changed them and showered them. And in the meantime, instead of, well, my old self would either work for a little bit or scroll on my phone or do something that is quite personal and selfish. But I decided to make dinner for the kids. And once I finished, my wife came and she's like, okay, so what do you want to have for dinner? And I was like, I can make us dinner because I'm already cooking. So what do you want to have? And she asked me to make her a sandwich. And while I was making it, I realized that, this is interesting. Like, I feel so happy that I can take care of her in a way that she asked me to. It's not that she needs someone who's strong to defend her against any intruder, because there's nothing happening at that point in time. She just wanted to eat something, and it was a pleasure to make food for her and myself. And eventually, we ate the kids' food as well. So, all in all, it was a good night.
They don't need to be a gorilla all the time.
Yeah.
Men can be gorillas and kittens and everything else, as well as the women.
Exactly. It's funny because, like, even in the animal kingdom, or like, because we're biologically we are kind of animals as well. So realizing what the animals or the mammals actually behave or react with can give us an indication of how we also react, especially like gorillas and monkeys. And because, like, they have a community, they build a community, and it's only when they exceed a number of primates in their tribe or location that there's usually an alpha, and then there's the second alpha, third alpha, fourth alpha, and they all know their place in the tribe itself. So it's really interesting to see how they do it. And also, like, banging the chest is some way of expressing that I am here. I'm the alpha. I'm able to provide for the tribe.
And so after all this discoveries, what else helps you continuing living this, like in every day? Do you sometimes fall back into your older self, or what kind of tools you have to continue living like this?
That's a really good question, because it's true. There are instances where I rethink about my own self, and I go back to the default setting of people pleasing, and it's always the case. It's a long process, so it's not like I took a magic pill or I read a book or I watched a YouTube clip and I immediately transformed or changed, and I was like, okay, I don't need to please people anymore. The awareness is always there, and I feel like now the awareness becomes more evident, easier as I go along. So whenever I tend to be a people's pleaser, I catch myself. So whether it's on a professional level, or even if we're out and speaking to random people, or like if we go to the grocery shop, or go to buy something from a store, and I want to always feel like I'm embraced or appreciated or loved, And I try not to show that, but the default setting is always there, just trying to make the other people happy with me being around. And I catch myself. And whenever I catch myself, I start questioning whether am I being a people's pleaser? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Do I want to continue in the same aspect of the relationship that I have? And if not, then continue. But it all ties down to like building that awareness of how I feel within that moment. And it's an ongoing process. So it never ends. And it's actually a blessing as well, because I'm grateful that I have this ability to turn inward of understanding whether I am defaulting back to the mindset programming that I've had. And it just takes reprogramming of the mind to be able to comprehend and adjust, pivots, or change the way that you think about the situations.
Yeah, awareness, being able really to reflect is such a big asset we have, because the only way of improving is to be able to grow in awareness. Otherwise, if you don't recognize there's something to improve, you can't. And if you don't manage to see it on everyday life, like this moment is the concrete situation when that's happening, it's very difficult to improve if you don't know on what you're working. So yeah, really,
Exactly.
awareness is an ongoing thing, and it's an everyday thing, every morning, every evening, like all the time. So that's a very good asset you have, and yeah, that's something very good to work on. Uh,
Yeah.
how would you advise? Let's say it's not my case, but let's say I'm a woman, I'm married to a guy, he's kind of a gorilla, most of the time. Would you have any advice for how to help him be more him and not necessarily as a gorilla? Like, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the situation would be, but I could explain it from my point of view because I've always loved the dynamics between a husband and a wife, or partners, or a couple, or just the way that men and women are. And I like to tie it into how important women are in the world, because this is going to sound a little bit out of the box, but I'm I'm quite religious, so I believe that there's an afterlife, a creation, creator, and all of these different types of elements. So in the way that everything was created, so the planets, the worlds, the animals, the angels, devils, and then mankind. And then the last creation is actually a woman. So the woman is the last creation of this entire cosmos or well-being. So having a woman be the last creation makes her a little bit more beautiful than a man. So that realization also connects me with how the feminine is so much more relevant, stronger, capable than a man. And it's completely different than what society or like where I come from or tradition might dictate. But it's also the case with the prophets as well. So Jesus was born from a woman, and she was there to support him. In Islam, when the Prophet Muhammad was scared, he went to his wife. He was raised by a mother. The mother is the one that also gives birth, supports the child, nurtures, breastfeeds, and is always there and has that connection. There's so much that women do for the society, for humanity, for mankind, for everything, that it makes me realize how important the feminine, the woman, the powerful aspect of that being is for any relationship. And as a man, having this understanding or realization brings me closer to that strong, confident being of what a woman is, rather than makes me think less of myself. So what I would say is just have that appreciation for what women can actually provide, do, and go through. And there's so much in terms of how capable women are. I mean, just even as a father and seeing my wife going through labor and having our kids and being there, it's amazing. 2 days, apologies, 2 days after my wife gave birth, she had an infected tooth and she had to do root canal. And when she came home after the procedure, she didn't show any emotions, any suffering or anything, because her priority was, am I going to need to take antibiotics because I'm breastfeeding? I don't want to take antibiotics because my child comes first. And for me, that was just so powerful. I thought of myself, if I had that procedure, I would really milk it. I would be like, I need to take some time off. I need to eat. I need to have this. Please take care of me. So just having like these small snips of awareness or realizations of what a woman can do is very empowering for a man to realize. It's kind of a long-winded answer that was all over the place, but it kind of tries to bring how I see the woman as well.
I think it's beautiful how you relate to your beliefs. I had already heard this thing of, the woman was the last creation, so she's more perfect, but more in a joke. What I saw was like t-shirts saying, first God drafted the man, then he made the final version. So
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
a similar idea, but I think it's beautiful how, you looking at your belief system, you say, yeah, there's actually such an important space for women in society, not just as a mother, but, and as supporting, but in general, you gave this example of your wife being so strong and just taking care of herself, taking care of the kids. And the examples you gave really relate a lot to, family, but that's something that really applies to anything. Like women have such important positions and they're fighting to have more important positions in the workplace, and they bring, when you have more women, you have so much of a different workplace, which with much more understanding, way less being just practical and that's it, finish, but much more human. So I like how you don't see this whole thing as somehow demeaning yourself, but because you see the value of having women, or the people that identify as women around, that brings so much value to everybody, and that's why it's worth going through this personal transformation that gives space to that. I like how you put it all together. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you in the way that you've also put it together in that way. It's so true, and it's it's completely different even in the workplace. So just having men in a meeting, they might decide or think or feel to act in one way or in another, but just adding a female into that dynamic really changes the behaviors. And I've seen that also in the workplace, in the professional environments, how a woman can really see different aspects of what we're doing. So, for example, we with especially after COVID, we have a lot of video meetings, and I feel like I'm good in reading characters and people, but one of my colleagues is very good in that and much better than me, and she picks up things that are really subtle, but add a lot of dynamic into the whole relationship, and it brings us much closer to the clients in delivering the reports that we need to prepare for them. So it was also very eye-opening to understand how important it is to have both the man and the woman, or the masculine, feminine energies within the workplace, and in an effort to just continue growing and delivering and performing at the workplace. So significantly important. And I feel like there was a part of me as a man, or like the mindset that I was in, that I thought that, well, women can just support the man in the workplace, but actually women can and are leading in the professional world, and we can see it from a lot of the CEOs out there as well.
Yeah, and you work also with productivity and with business, so you're a coach really on that direction. So maybe for us to close, some last thoughts on, advice on not being afraid to find yourself and just go deeper in awareness, and then we close.
Yeah, absolutely. So my process started, it's funny to say, but my wife realized my behavior and also, I would say, self-inflicted type of pain, and told me that I should speak to someone. And as a man, I never liked that idea that I need to speak to someone or that there are people who are there that can support me in my mental journey, or if I'm suffering from something. I always thought that it makes me look crazy. So I'm not crazy. So I would always avoid that. But she kept supporting me and telling me that I should speak to someone. And what triggered the domino effect that helped throughout my transformation was I joined a an online webinar with a parent psychologist, and I was the only man on that call, and it was only women. And the psychologist was explaining how children feel, behave, react, respond to certain situations. And she said, whoever is interested, please reach out after the call, and we can have a discussion about your children. And I was thinking, why not? Maybe she can help me understand how I can make my children more obedient. This is still the man that bangs his chest was thinking. And when I spoke to her, it quickly turned into my own therapy session. So I started realizing that, it's not the children, it's actually me that's feeling this way, that's triggered, that is suppressing all these emotions. And it took that energy to really go deep, but it started with just speaking to someone, understanding that there are people there to support me, that care about me, that want to help me. So it started with that discussion. And then it went into me going deeper about understanding my own self, upbringing, and really facing my own demons. So I took the time to understand how my upbringing is, what kind of dynamics were there, the history within the household that I was brought up in as well, and tradition and society. And it can sometimes become a little bit scary or ugly because you don't want to leave that type of identity that you have portrayed or picked up from your parents raising you in a certain way, and their parents raised them in a certain way. And it just keeps going back and back until you realize that you can break that cycle by changing the way that you start believing and behaving in the way that you're raising your children as well. But it all started with just having a conversation and realizing that I needed to understand myself more. But that's really the start, is listening to your body, listening to yourself, listening to how, if there's any detachment between your mind and body, that would trigger some sort of action that you need to take. And that action for me was to start speaking and then to do the internal work.
Very, very good advice. Thank you, Hassan. It was very good having you here in the show. I think it's going to be very valuable for the women listening, the guys listening. And yeah, thank you very much. And we'll talk later.
Thank you, Laila. Thank you for having me. And it's been a pleasure.
You just listened to the Find You podcast, From Sick of It to Simply You. It was wonderful to have you here. Stay tuned for the next episodes.